Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the University of Nottingham PGCEi webinar. My name is Helen Spyropoulos, and I'm the Admissions Manager at Stafford Associates. And joining me this evening, all the way from the University of Nottingham, is Dr. Rupert, as well as very important administrative support. I'm now going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, and I shall be joining you towards the end of the webinar. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. Okay, everyone, so we're going to talk a bit about the University of Nottingham in general, just very briefly, and the School of Education here, just to give you a sense of the context. And then we'll talk, of course, about the PGCEi course, try and explain a bit about what the course is trying to do, what it isn't, as well as what it is, and then some details on the course structure, what you can expect to cover, and how all of that works. And then after that, we'll talk a bit about how you apply and some of the processes and what you need and the deadlines and so on. And at the end, as Helen explained, we've got an opportunity for you to ask any questions. So if there's anything that we haven't covered, we'll do our best to answer. And if not, we'll do our best to find out and to get back to you after that. Okay, so the University of Nottingham, you can see from this slide some of the current statistics here. So the university is part of what we call in the UK the Russell Group of universities. So it's part of a top group of universities with a high reputation, not only nationally but internationally. It's a university that's known internationally and recognised and highly placed in these QS university rankings worldwide. It's a university also that has a really great reputation for teaching. It has one of the gold awards, which are now awarded. We have gold, silver and bronze awards for teaching quality in the UK. So it has a gold rated teaching award. It's also, you can see here from the second point, a university that has a really international dimension to it. So you can see here from the Times Good University Guide this year, International University of the Year. And we don't just mean that we work with a lot of international students, which I work with a lot of international students here in the UK, for example, as well as overseas in the UAE. But we also have campuses overseas. So we have a campus in China and one in Malaysia. So we have this real, truly global feel to what we do. Within education, more specifically, the School of Education is, it's been going in one form or another here for over 100 years. And as a subject, it's very highly ranked. So it's important to think about not only the university itself, but education within that. So in, for example, the recent rankings of research in the UK, education as a subject, that comes out third in the UK out of a great many universities. As a subject more broadly, it's 8th in the UK. So this is a subject that's particularly prominent and well regarded within a university that's highly ranked. So what that means is you're in safe hands in terms of tutors who are involved in cutting edge research and developments in education. And you also have that kind of reputation attached to a qualification from the university. And it means that our courses can be informed by some of the latest thinking, and some of the people who contribute to that course are the people at the forefront of creating that knowledge in education. So let's have a think a bit more about the course itself. So the PGCEi stands for Postgraduate Certificate in Education International. So this is a course that's been around now for something over 10 years and has grown enormously in that time. So we now have cohorts around the world in 20 different locations. We've had between 4,000 and 5,000 people registered on this course, and currently something like 900 students around the world studying on this course. So it's a course that's studied all over the world, and we have what we call a blended approach. So that means that while the course is common all over the world, and some of it is studied from a distance through online materials, which we'll talk about in due course, You also have this face-to-face element. So we have cohorts that meet for face-to-face tuition at all these different locations in continents around the world. So the location that we're talking about today is a cohort centered in the Middle East and in the UAE specifically, which is where we meet for our face-to-face workshops. So we've got similar setups going on around the world in China, South America, countries in Africa, Europe, and so on. So you're part of a global family on this course, and you have a chance, in fact, to interact online with people studying this course all over the world. But you also have that personal touch of having face-to-face meetings and tuition from tutors like myself who will come out to the UAE and teach with you at workshops. Thinking about what the course is trying to do and being clear about what it is and what it isn't offering, this is not a license to teach. So it's really important because people often are concerned to have some kind of accreditation or qualified teacher status or license to teach. This isn't a course that's setting out to offer any of those things. It's a course that is a master's level study, and it's academic study. So it's the academic study of education as a discipline. It's not a course that's assessing you in the classroom. You will, as we'll see later, you will need access to a classroom, and we want you to be, in some sense, an educator. But we're not going to be seeing you in that setting. We or anyone else are not going to be assessing your practice. So this is assessing you in academic terms, through academic work, in terms of you as an educator. So it's not assessing you in your educational setting, your school, or wherever that might be. The course is aiming to develop you as a professional, though, in ways that should be of practical use. So this is a course that's going to get you thinking more broadly about education. It's going to expose you to a lot of educational ideas and different practices from not only your region in the world, but around the world. And in doing so, and through the connections we make with the work you do in schools or other educational settings, it will influence your practice. So I always talk to people about when I was studying for my master's in education, when I was still working full-time as an educator in school. So I was studying at this level, but I was studying for a full MA in education. And although that course, like this one, didn't have anything directly impacting my practice, it didn't involve seeing me in school, it had a huge impact on what I did in school, because it got me thinking differently, it opened my eyes, it challenged my assumptions and my perspectives about education. So it definitely had an impact on what I did in the classroom. So although we don't have that practical element built in, you can really expect some impact in what you do in the classroom, I hope. Just going back to the second point on this slide about the face-to-face meetings. So on this course, we have 2 face-to-face workshops. We have one right at the start of the course, which would be within about 2 weeks of the course beginning. And we have one about halfway through. So what that enables you to do is a number of things. First of all, you get to meet your tutor. So the tutor that's going to be with you throughout this course, throughout the year, who's going to be liaising with you, who's going to be marking your work. This is somebody that you've met. This is somebody that you've been in the room with, who's met you, who's got to know you a little bit. So I think that personal connection is really, really important and really valuable. It also gives you some guidance on, particularly at the first workshop, on how the course works. So you've got someone there to do a sort of induction with you about how to work through the online materials and how we're going to work on the assignments and just maybe logistically and practically how this whole thing fits together, because that can be quite daunting. It's also an introduction at the workshop to some of the big ideas. So we don't want our meetings to be all about just procedural issues. So we make sure that we talk about the big ideas in education that we're going to be covering in the modules. And you do activities and some work and have some lecture material, which is all about setting up some of those thoughts and exploring those concepts. And finally, but by no means least importantly, it's a chance for you to meet with your fellow students. So what's really, really valuable about this course is not just what you get from the tutors, it's not just what you get from our materials, it's the opportunity to network with other educators in the region, other people working in schools which may be very, very different from yours. So we have people working in schools like international baccalaureate schools, we have people working in SABIS schools, we have people working in GEM schools, British curriculum, American curriculum, all sorts of different schools. And it's very easy in day-to-day working life to get quite narrow in our focus and just to think about the kind of setting that we work in. So being in a room, being in a group with people from a diverse range of countries, who are from a diverse range of nationalities and cultures, also who are working in different types of school, is a really, really valuable experience. It's a chance to really broaden those perspectives that you have. So within a cohort that's usually about 100 people meeting in the UAE, we split you off into 5 groups normally. So there's about 20 who are placed with each tutor. And in that group of 20, we try and create some diversity so that you have people from all of those different backgrounds. And also, of course, different age phases. So people working with early years students all the way through primary, secondary, up to adult learners. People from different countries, and a really nice mix that you can get together with and work with. So that networking with others is a big feature of what we do. So we'll have a think now about the structure of the course. So the course, in the course of the year, or probably in practice about 10 months of study, you're covering 3 modules. The modules are compulsory, so there's no selection of what you want to do in terms of the actual module choice. However, within those modules, there's an element of choice, particularly in modules 2 and 3, where you can select units, as we call them, parts of the module, which are of most interest and relevance to you. So in that way, you get to personalize things and to tailor things to your interest. Also, in terms of the assignments, which I'll mention in a minute, you can direct your work and your writing to your particular setting. So if you are a teacher working in early years, for example, or you're a learning support assistant, teaching assistant working in early years, you can be doing all of your assignments focused on that kind of context. If you are a secondary maths teacher, in contrast, you can write all about secondary maths issues. So all of the studying and all of the assessment can be tailored to your particular setting and your particular professional role. So I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. Each of these modules is equally weighted, 20 credits each, so you're going to end up with 60 master's credits. You complete them, it says here, over 12 months. In practice, the working time is probably closer to about 10 months, but we call it a year's course. So the 3 modules you can see here take you on a bit of a journey. So we start off with a module on educational aims and values in international contexts. So this is asking the question, really, what is education for? And that might sound like a strange thing to ask, but it's a question maybe we don't often ask ourselves because we're so bound up in what we're doing in everyday practice. But what is education for? Is it about trying to produce a workforce for a country? Is it about people getting the best possible qualifications? Is it about educating citizens who are going to change the world and make the world a better place? Or is it about nurturing people's individual interests? Does it actually start with the learner more than the set curriculum? There's all sorts of different ways of thinking about education. So we explore those different perspectives, and we do so in the distinctly international school setting. So this is a course that is really geared to the international educator. Having covered that and thought about what education might be trying to achieve, we then move on to thinking about learning, so different theories of learning and how students go about learning, and also linked to that, different ways of teaching. So we look at issues around different styles of what we call pedagogy, or the way that we teach, issues around things like assessment and inclusion and behaviour, and all of the things that you encounter on a daily basis. So module 2 is about sort of putting those aims and values into practice and how we actually go about our work. And that's a module I think will connect with what you do every day, but will really broaden out those horizons. And then the final module is about inquiry, and it's about asking questions about how we know that students have understood what we've taught them, but doing so through you doing a small inquiry project, a small research project, where you might, for example, interview some of your students or look very closely at the work that they do and delve into an aspect of your practice that you determine. So you go on this sort of journey through what education is for, through how learners learn and therefore teachers teach, and then how we understand what our learners have learned and how we can inquire into our own practice. So we have this logical sequence through the year. And then, as it says on the final point here, the assessment is not through exams, it's not through assessment of your practice, it's through a written piece of work in each case. So each module is assessed by a 4,000 word piece of work, written piece of work. So often people are, perhaps they're relieved that there are not exams, but they're also daunted sometimes at the thought of writing at master's level, perhaps in a discipline in education or social sciences more broadly, that they're not used to writing in. So the reassurance we would offer is that there's a lot of structure that goes behind this. Part of what we do at the face-to-face workshops is all about telling you what criteria we have for our assignments, looking at some assignments people have done before, really making it clear what we're looking for and what you're trying to do and how that will appear in practice. You also have a chance for each assignment to submit a proposal to your tutor, so your tutor can have a look at what you're planning to do and give you feedback on that. And you have a chance for the first module to submit a full draft of the assignment that isn't marked, but you get detailed feedback talking about whether you're on the right track and how to develop your work. So we know that people often feel perhaps slightly intimidated by being assessed academically in this way, and therefore we put all of that structure into place to try and reassure you and provide a bit of a foundation for you in doing that. It's also worth noting, we've talked about this being a master's level course. For some people, the PGCEi is in itself all that they're interested in. They're interested in that educational certificate and that year of study, and then that's the end of their story. But for lots of people, it might just be the beginning. So because you've been studying at master's level, you can transfer those credits, assuming you've passed all the modules at master's level. Those credits can be transferred into an MA in education. So University of Nottingham is very well renowned for its MA programs. If you want to study our generic MA in education, you can transfer your 60 credits through, and that represents the first third of the course that you've done already. You've done it, you've paid for it, and you therefore are 2/3 of the way through the course already, and then can select other modules to study. We also have more specialist MA programs. You can see here our MA in special needs, educational leadership and management. We also have an MA TESOL. And for those more specialist programs, you can transfer 30 of your credits. So every year, it's really great to see some of our PGCEi students continuing their study. It doesn't have to be immediately. You have up to 10 years that you can use those credits. So it may be that you come back a few years later and you want to resume your study then. So that's something to think about, maybe not immediately, but looking further ahead. It's also important to think about the course structure in terms of the second point here, which is about all of the materials. So we've mentioned the face-to-face workshops and all of the things we hope you'll gain from that. But when you are working at a distance in between those workshop times and you're working online, all of the materials that you need are provided. So we have our virtual learning environments which is on the Moodle platform that some of you may have worked with in other courses you've done. All of the modules you study have particular embedded work that you work through. So you have readings, you have videos to look at, you have some audio material, there are links to different sources. You also have access to our electronic library here at the University of Nottingham. So you don't need to be buying books or buying journals or any other materials. Everything you need can be accessed through the university library electronically. So as well as the core materials that are embedded in the course, you've got access to wider reading and literature searches of your own through the electronic library. And the course materials are currently being updated. So every few years, the course is updated and all of the materials revamped and new things brought in. And if you're going to be starting in our next cohort, which as you'll see in a moment is starting in October, you'll be one of the first cohorts to have the new version. So we're currently finalizing our new version of the course. So in October, the materials will be very, very up to date indeed, and you'll be one of the first cohorts to use that. The final point here is that as well as individual tutor support, so the tutor that you've met at the face-to-face workshop, who you can liaise with through email, through telephone tutorials, through Skype if you have access to Skype. I know some of you may not do. As well as that tutor support, you've got the support of your peers. So I mentioned the power of learning from other people and networking with other educators locally. So we want that to continue even when you're not there in the same room together. So as part of the course, built into the materials, there are various opportunities to contribute to a forum online. So we ask you to put your thoughts about a particular issue into a post on that forum, and then you interact with other people's posts. So you can see what other people are writing, you can respond to them, and you can get into a kind of dialogue. And at times we have what we call the global forum, which is a chance to do the same thing, but for people all around the world who may be studying in Peru or in Ghana or in Vietnam, anywhere in the world that we have cohorts, they can be interacting with your posts as well. So you can be part of a conversation globally. So that peer side of things is really important to us. Okay, so we'll move on now to thinking a bit about how you apply for the course and how you get on here. So because this is a postgraduate certificate in education, and we said that it's at master's level, the usual expectation is that you have your bachelor's degree already. So we tend to be looking for at least a second-class bachelor's degree normally, or an approved equivalent kind of professional qualification. So it's important to think that if you don't have a bachelor's, but you do have other qualifications in education, some substantial experience as well, you may still be eligible for the course. The course is delivered in English, and we are working at this master's level, so you need a good proficiency in academic English. So you can see here that if English isn't your first language, and if you haven't been educated through English, then you would need to engage with the IELTS process, and you can see there the sort of IELTS levels that we're talking about. You need to be what we would call an established educator. So what do we mean by that? Well, it's quite a broad description. You might be a teacher in a classroom already. You might be an assistant or a learning support assistant. You could be a volunteer in a school as long as you have access to a classroom and the opportunity to work with students. Or maybe you are working in an educational capacity in some other way. So there's quite a broad umbrella term there when we talk about being an educator. But some of the modules and some of the activities will require you to do some work in classrooms. Although we won't be seeing that work, we won't be assessing that work that you do, it will feed into the assignments that you do. You'll be writing about activities that you've done with students, or perhaps interviews you've carried out with students. So you need to be in a position where you have access to a classroom where you can do that. And of course, because a lot of the study is going to be at a distance, you need good, reliable internet access to do that. We've talked already about how, although the standard entry requirement is that bachelor's degree, we do look at other qualifications and other backgrounds. So if you have what we might call a non-standard application, if you've got extensive professional experience or other qualifications that you think would stand you in good stead and give you that kind of readiness for this course, we'd really encourage you to apply. We'd encourage you to talk to your Stafford academic consultants, liaise with them, and consider putting an application in. And we'd look at those non-standard applications on a case-by-case basis. So every year there will be a few people who come with a slightly different background, and we've been able to make a case for them. When you apply, you're going to need these kind of things. I won't talk through them all because many of them are fairly self-explanatory. What I pick out though is, it talks about a reference here. So think about who is going to be your referee and what they might say about you. What they say, of course, is going to be up to them. You're not going to write that reference, but you need to pick somebody who can give a good account of you in professional terms as an educator, but hopefully also in academic terms. So in terms of your readiness for master's level study, you know, your reliability, your ability to manage deadlines and to balance work-life commitments, all of those kind of things. So if there's somebody who is primed to talk about you in terms of those kind of issues, that would be particularly useful. The personal statement as well, the third point here, is important. So think about trying to tell us about your motivation to work on this course. Why do you want to study this course? What are you hoping to achieve from it? Think about your educational background and what you bring as a professional in terms of your experience and all of the things you'll be drawing on. Think also about your academic background, you as a learner. What can you tell us that is convincing about your readiness to study at this level? And finally, think about the transferable skills that you have. So are there generic skills that you maybe bring from another workplace? So lots of our students have worked in the past in other jobs. Some of them have worked in very, very different professions, but maybe you bring with you skills that are to do with communication, time management, all of these kind of things that actually will be very useful in this setting as well. So we've got intakes in the UAE cohorts starting twice a year. So we have cohorts starting in March and we have cohorts starting in October. So I was recently over in the UAE myself in March working with cohorts, and we had a new cohort starting then. But we're currently accepting applications for our next intake, which begins on the 1st of October. So that seems like quite a long way away. Here we are getting, I guess, towards the end of April, and October seems a world away. But actually these courses, and particularly the October cohort, fills up very quickly. So what we'd urge you to do is begin to apply now. Stafford are already processing applications and are ready to take your application. Places are strictly limited. So we have a cap on the number of people that we have because we want to have that good tutor to student ratio. So it's in your interest to apply early and to make sure you get that sort of unconditional offer as soon as possible. For this October cohort, the face-to-face workshops, which are compulsory, so it's worth bearing in mind that those workshops are an integral part of what we do, and you must be able to attend them. They would be the 11th and 12th of October, so they're weekend workshops. So one thing to reassure you about is we're not expecting you to come out of work on a working day. We know that would be very difficult for most people to do. So these workshops take place on Fridays and Saturdays over the weekend. So the 11th and 12th of October, so that would be very shortly after the 1st of October start date. And then that second workshop I said was midway through the course, would be 6th and 7th of March. So it's great, you know, as a tutor, I always enjoy coming back for that second workshop in March. It's nice to renew the acquaintance, you know, to get to know all the students. People tend to turn up slightly nervous in October because, of course, it's something new. And if you feel like that, everybody's going to be feeling that way. But then you come back in March halfway through the course and you feel a lot more confident. You get to see all of your fellow students again, and it's a really nice atmosphere to meet everybody up that second time. You can see here the fee structure and application fee. So all of that's handled through Stafford, and your Stafford consultants can talk to you more about that. So we've come to the end of the input that I'm going to give, but this is the moment when we can come back, bring Helen back into the conversation and have a look and see if there are any questions that you have and things that we can help you with.
Okay, thank you again, Dr. Rupert. That was very, very informative. And I do see quite a lot of questions that have come through. So as I said, I am going to start grouping them together. Okay, so we have a lovely question from Janet. Once I achieve the PGCEi, what would I need to do to be able to teach in a school in the UK and British education internationally?
Okay, so this is a common question, of course, and it's a really good thing to ask about, because we want you to be very clear about the kind of qualification that you're getting. So I said already that this course isn't giving you a qualified teacher status or making that kind of claim for anywhere in the world. And of course, with an international course, we can't claim to qualify you because every nation has its own different requirements. If you were to come back to teach in England, for example, usually the qualification that people would have is called qualified teacher status, or QTS. Because you're not getting that on the course, there is an extra step you would need to take in order to do that. And typically what people would do is they would go down a route in England that's called assessment only QTS. So the government, who are the people that award QTS, they have a system where you can get a job in a school in England as an unqualified teacher and be paid as an unqualified teacher. And then while you're working, you can be assessed. So you don't have to do any assignments or further study or anything, but people come and assess you, and they assess your practical teaching and the evidence that you've collected. And over a period of time, which depends on the hours that you're working, but it could be as short as a term, you can then gain your qualification, your QTS, on the job and be assessed in that way. Normally, to get onto an assessment only course, or to be assessed in that way, you need to have taught for a couple of years first. So typically people might have worked as a teacher in the UAE or in some other country, got that experience, been teaching for a couple of years, come back to the UK, and if they're working in England, they can then apply for one of these assessment only places. So that's not something that's part of this course. It's not something University of Nottingham is offering. But if you just simply Googled assessment only QTS in the UK, you'll see the government's website, and you can find out locations all over the country for places that are offering that route. So that would typically be the way that you do that.
Excellent, good. And Nazakat, the question is whether the October intake fills up, and will it actually be rolled onto the March intake? So I will answer that, yes, absolutely. Once we have reached our capacity numbers for the October intake, we do not take any more students, and then your application will be rolled over to March. Okay, so if you really do want to apply and be part of the October intake, I really do advise that you start sending us your documents now already. We have already started sending applications to the university. The cohort does actually fill up very quickly. So I really do advise that you get in touch with your academic consultant, and let's get that application in as soon as possible. Okay. All right, so Al-Him's question, is the workshops only in the UAE, or would you have workshops in the UK?
So for this cohort that we're talking about here with Stafford Global, these are workshops in the UAE. This course, though, as I said, does run internationally, and we have cohorts around the world. So we do have cohorts here in Nottingham. So there are groups that meet here in Nottingham, and they study the same course, and their workshops are here in the UK. So if you're interested in that, that would be something slightly separate from what we're liaising here with Stafford about, but if you went to our website, what you can see is all the locations around the world. So if actually you were interested in being back in the UK and you're going to be based in the UK and you want to study here and meet us face to face here, yes, there's certainly ways that you can do that. So I point you towards our website. If you just go to University of Nottingham website, look for education, you'll see on the landing page there details about the PGCEi, and you can look at all the global locations there.
Okay, and how many hours a week should I be dedicating to this program, which is actually a very, very common question that we do get.
Yeah, so yeah, as Helen says, yeah, this is understandably something people always want to know. So there isn't a standard amount. You know, we're not going to be checking the number of hours you do, and of course people work in very different ways. What we tend to say though, just to give you a guide, if you break down the number of hours that we would associate with the number of credits for a master's level module, and then you sort of average that out across the year, we'd be looking at something like about 12 hours a week. So 12 hours a week could be handled in lots of different ways. Some people may do a little less, some people it may take a little longer. You could say, well, I'll do a little bit of that every evening and make it a habit to do, you know, an hour or two or a couple of hours each night on your PGCEi work. Other people, for various reasons, whether it's family commitments, work commitments, or whatever, that isn't the way they'd work. So they perhaps would have a focused, concentrated day where, you know, on a weekend they devote, you know, an entire day and try and do their big chunk of time all on a Friday or all on a Saturday. And of course, there's going to be ups and downs in terms of the year where maybe there's a week where you can't do any work at all, but then in the holidays when you're not working in school, you can kind of catch up and you can do quite a lot of work in a concentrated way. So it's not that every single week you'd have to do 12 hours, but if you were to average it out across the year, that's about the time commitment that we're talking about.
Okay, and Janet's question is regarding fees and how are the fees paid. So Janet, the fees are actually paid in very, very flexible monthly installments. So I do advise that you do get in touch with your personal academic consultant. We'll be able to give you the breakdown of the fee structure. And as I said, very, very flexible installments. So do get in touch with us regarding that. Okay, and Elham's question relates to the workshops. In the event that I cannot get a visa, will I be able to get my money back for the program? What is your advice regarding the workshops?
So the workshops are a compulsory part of the course, and the reason for that is that it's quite difficult to succeed on the course without coming along. There's so much that you gain, not just that richness I mentioned about liaising with other people, but also the guidance on how to work through the modules and how the course works. So it's something where, you know, you really need to be there. Of course, though, you know, we do understand that things get in the way sometimes that are unforeseen, and of course, something like a visa restriction can prevent you from traveling. So the advice we would give is, first of all, to find out very early on whether you would be able to get there. If you're in a place where there is likely to be a visa problem, try to find out as soon as possible. And if it's a case of having to have an offer from the university in order to get that visa, then of course that suggests applying early on. If you find that there is going to be an issue for any reason, visa or otherwise, with attending, if we're talking about not being able to come to that first workshop in October, what we'd say is you really then need to defer. You need to not come along for that cohort, but come instead to the next cohort. Start in March, start 6 months, 5 months later in March, and join a cohort where you can come. If you find yourself halfway through a course and you're with us and you're studying and you've come to the first workshop, and then in some unforeseen way there is something like an illness, an emergency, or some visa situation that you hadn't been able to anticipate, and you're midway through the course, we're not in the business of sort of throwing you out or trying to be difficult. We would try and work with you and get around that in that case. But that's really got to be an exceptional situation that you can't foresee. So if there is a problem like a visa situation that you do anticipate, really think about whether this is the right time to come along, and look into that as early as possible, because we don't really want you to be starting the course on the back foot and without attending.
Excellent. And next question is, in your experience, can I complete my QTS training in any British school worldwide?
It's not something that we are involved in directly, so I can't speak with authority on this and be very specific, but there are some British international schools worldwide that I believe do have the authorization to offer QTS. So although there won't be many of those, there are some around the world where you may be able to do that. So the usual way of getting QTS is in England, because it's an English qualification. But if you are in certain British schools, they may have that kind of accreditation and therefore that authorization. So the advice would be to check carefully. If you are in a school or you're applying for a job in a school where you think that may be the case, have a look at their website and talk to people there and be very certain about that. So that may be a possibility, but it's something you would need just to check very specifically and carefully.
Absolutely. And Yasmin, your question is actually very similar to one that we've just had. The advice here, as Dr. Rupert said, is to actually get hold of QTS directly. They will look at your qualifications, they'll look at your experience on a personal basis. So do get in touch with them. You're very welcome to contact us, and we'll be able to give you the link and a contact number for QTS, so that you can actually have a chat to them on how to get your QTS. Okay. All right. And Katie's question, assignments are something that I'm very, very scared of. How are these graded, and are they difficult?
Okay, so Katie, you're not alone in that, so don't worry. I think most people who come along have some fears about that. So even if they don't share those fears very openly, you'll be in a room full of people feeling quite similar to you. So first of all, don't worry, that's normal. So secondly, how are they graded? Well, they're graded according to master's criteria. So on master's courses, typically you have bands which would go from a distinction at the top to a merit and then to a pass. So you'd have three categories of a pass grade. So our assignments are graded in that way, so that if you did carry on and work on a full master's at some point, everything lines up and they've been graded in an equivalent way and in the same scheme. Your other question, are they difficult? It's quite hard to answer. There's, of course, you know, the master's level qualification has a kind of respect about it, which is because of a level of challenge and a level of rigor. But that's not to say it's something that you should be intimidated by. If you've got your bachelor's degree, then this would be a normal step on. It would be the logical next step up, and the progress that you'd be ready to make. And as I was saying in the presentation, we do a lot of work with you to try and give you some structure and give you some guidance and reassurance, so that you're not coming into this cold and you're not on your own with things. And a lot of what you're doing in the assignments is not only talking about theory and the things you've read, but it's also about how you relate that to your practice. And of course, when we get to talking about your practice, wherever you work and whatever you do, that's where you're the expert. So you come along not as a complete novice, but you come with expertise. You understand the job that you do and the role that you have. So part of the assignment is about thinking about that critically, and it's about linking that to what you've read. So as well as the things that are going to be unfamiliar, there's an element here which is familiar to you. So the message, I think, is don't be put off and don't be intimidated, and we will work with you to give you that reassurance.
Okay, and Anastasia's question is, do you think that I'll be able to get a very good teaching job in Canada with your qualification?
Well, I can't be very specific about that because I've never been a teacher in Canada, and as we were saying just now, all over the world, different different countries and even different states within, or provinces within countries, have their own regulations. And I think Canada may be like the US, where, you know, if you're in British Columbia, your qualification may be very different from being in Ontario or somewhere else. So I can't be specific about what a Canadian school system would be asking for. What I can say, though, is that a course like this, working at master's level in education, is a great thing to have on that CV or resume. Going back to relating this to my own experiences, when I was working in schools and I did my master's level work, it wasn't something that directly opened the door. It didn't automatically qualify me to do something different, but it definitely helped my career because it showed a commitment to study, to further study, and it showed an interest in broadening perspectives and horizons, and I think it improved my practice as a teacher. So in all of those ways, this is something I think that can only help your career, but what we can't be very specific about is whether it will directly open a door for you.
Good. And Maureen's question is, can I actually come and visit the university at any point during my studies? Can I perhaps come and see the tutors there by any chance throughout my studies?
Yeah, so it's not built into the course. It's not any formal expectation, and of course, most people on the course are probably not going to be in Nottingham during that year. But if you are, you know, if you're from the UK or you're visiting the UK and you want to come and see Nottingham and feel, you know, an even closer part of that family, then it would be lovely to see you. And, you know, you could drop in by arrangement and see your tutor, no doubt. And that would be a really nice thing to do. So yes, we'd love to see you. Also, at the end of the course, everybody is invited to graduation here in Nottingham. And, you know, understandably, most people are not able to attend and travel in that way, but every year some of our cohorts do, some of the UAE cohorts do, and they're here with PGCEi graduates from all over the world. And again, it's just great to welcome you, and it's great for you to see the university here, you know, in reality, and really feel part of that. So yeah, in principle, that's a great thing to do.
Okay, and Carly's question is, there are some other programs out there that do not have workshops. Why is your program got the workshops, and what is the importance of attending these?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's important for you to look at other offerings and other courses and think about what's the best fit for you. You know, we think the workshops are a really integral part of the course. I think they give you not only a stronger chance of success on the course because of all the input and the guidance that you get. I think they give you a higher quality of tuition because you're actually meeting your tutors, people like me and the team that I come out with. You're meeting us face to face, and I think there's no real substitute for that. But the other thing I think, which is the bit of the course you probably aren't anticipating and people don't automatically think of first, is what we said about that interprofessional networking. So it's something that goes beyond the academic study, but it's a chance for you to mingle and learn from other people who are working in the region. And often people are really interested to find out about different school systems. So whatever school system you might be working in, I think it's great for your career prospects to have an understanding of the wider world out there and what kind of different schools you might be able to work in, what kind of qualities those schools are looking for, to make some contacts in those schools, and all of that. If you imagine attending workshops where there's, you know, 100 people in the big cohort and 20 people, you know, within your subgroup, that's a really almost unique networking opportunity for you. So I would say that's another big reason for that. Having said all that, it's then over to you, isn't it, to decide whether that's something that you value or something that you think isn't necessary. But personally, I think those are really, really important reasons to get together and big advantages of having that face-to-face element.
Absolutely. And if I start my program now in October, when is the graduation scheduled?
So if you start in October, then you would be normally giving in your final work sometime in July. And your work would be formally passed through an exam board, which is the process at any university which formally gives you your qualification. That would happen usually in October, so a year after you've begun, which is why we talk of a 12-month course. So that's the point at which you could receive certificates and have that formal kind of certification. In terms of the actual ceremony, if you wanted to attend the ceremony, then you would come to our December ceremony. So your formal qualification would be confirmed and certificates could be sent to you in October, a year after you start. But if you want to have that certificate awarded in person and come along to the ceremony, that would be the December one.
Okay, and will I be able to progress to an MA after I have completed this PGCEi, or would I need to actually gain more working experience?
No, you could proceed smoothly onto an MA from this. Some people like to do that immediately, and they say, you know, I'm in the routine and the habit of working, and you know, maybe they're scared to stop in case they never start again. So they like to just carry on and just go straight into an MA. And at our workshops, we talk to you all about how you can do that and more detail about how the MA course works. And it's a nice thing if you do the University of Nottingham MA, there'll be familiar faces on that. So I teach at the moment on that course myself, for instance. So, you know, you encounter people you've met before. Other people, though, like to say, you know, I'd just like a break from studying for a while and concentrate on some other things, or I want to go away and develop professionally, and I want to get some more years of experience and come back and do the rest of the MA a bit later, because sometimes you could argue you have a richer experience because you have more practice to draw on. So either way, it's up to you, but you've got a 10-year period where you can use those credits.
Okay, and I have completed my degree in English from a local university. Is it necessary for me still to undertake an IELTS exam?
Well, often if you've done your degree in English and all of your tuition's been in English, it may not be necessary for IELTS. You may be exempted from that, but you just need to check, and you can do this through Stafford. Just check that your university is on this sort of approved or recognised list of institutions. So the answer is you may be able to avoid doing your IELTS, but you just need to check. We need to look at your specific place that you studied.
Okay, and Victoria, her question is about you know, the application on a non-standard basis, and how long does it take to actually assess an application?
Well, we can usually process those non-standard applications reasonably quickly. They get looked at here by an admissions tutor, and if that person decides that it's a case that we feel we can make, it then has to go to a panel at the university. So there is a bit of a process to go through. It doesn't normally take all that long, but what I'd say is it's not something to leave to the last minute. So if you do have a non-standard application, I would say that's a greater argument for trying to apply as soon as possible. And then, for instance, your Stafford contacts may be able to advise you if they can immediately see something else that is missing that you need to think about. And then it gives us at the university a little bit longer to look at. So it doesn't take a great deal of time, but certainly don't leave it to the last minute, and apply as soon as you can.
Absolutely. And I was just about to tell Victoria that, is do send your application to us probably within the next 2 weeks if possible. Again, and Dr. Rupert is quite correct, your personal academic consultant will be able to advise you on your documentation and what is required, especially on a non-standard entry. So do get in touch with us quite urgently so that we can get that application into the university as soon as possible.
And one thing I would just add to that, Helen, is when we talked before about the personal statement and your reference, if your application is a non-standard one, I would be especially attentive to those things and make sure that if there is a gap, for example, you don't have a bachelor's degree, and that's the case you're trying to make, see if you can really be very convincing in your statement about why it is that you feel you've got equivalent expertise, and make sure you choose a referee who is ready also to comment on why you should be allowed to do the course. So, you know, whatever is non-standard about your application, try and kind of fill that gap very strategically in the way you apply.
Absolutely. And Victoria's just sent us a message. All documents are being submitted tomorrow. So fingers crossed. Right. Okay, excellent, Victoria. That's great. Super. Okay, and all right, so we're just going to quickly go on to Blessing's question. I have a higher national diploma certificate from a polytechnic, and I do have over 7 years teaching experience. Can I qualify for the course just based on my diploma certificates?
So, Blessing, that's one of the situations where we probably need to look at that in more detail as an individual case. Certainly, you've got something there that it's not a bachelor's degree, but it is indication of higher level study, and you mentioned extensive experience. So just on those kind of details, that's something where I would say you may very well have a good case that you can make. So I think that sounds like definitely something to talk to your consultant about at Stafford, and perhaps get an application in as soon as you can, and we can have a look at that in detail.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, and the next question is, can I perhaps complete this program in less than 12 months? I am getting pressure from my school at the moment to try and get this qualification done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so this is again one of those questions we often have, because sometimes people are studying for their own intrinsic interest, and other times people are studying under maybe a degree of pressure to get a certain qualification. So the answer is you can slightly fast track the program by negotiation. So what you would tend to do is begin the program just in the normal way. We tend to get you to complete the first module and just see how you get on, because until you do the study, it's a bit hard to predict how long things are going to take you and how challenging it's going to be. But if you do the first module and you feel comfortable that you can succeed and you could speed things up, then you could liaise with your tutor, and we could agree with you some individual dates that bring things forward. And so in theory, you could qualify and do that more quickly. In practice, what I would say is this very rarely happens, because students tend to find that they do need the time we've allocated, and that is probably about the right sort of workload. So we don't often have people who do work through this more quickly, but it is something that you can do, and you can talk to us about, but we'd urge you to do the first module first and just see how you get on.
Okay, and Natasha's question I'll answer. Is this program offered in Qatar? The program is not offered in Qatar. It is distance learning with the workshops, which are mandatory. So you have to be very, very careful and make sure that you will be able to travel to the UAE, because the workshops, as Dr. Rupert has said, are a compulsory component of this program. So do get in touch with your academic consultant, and we'll be able to advise you on that issue. Okay. Right, and our next program is Sorry, our next question. Can I stop my studies at any point and then continue again? What is the maximum time that you will allow me to finish this program?
Yeah, so sometimes things in life happen and get in the way. First of all, I'd say, if you can foresee an issue and a reason you'd need to stop your studies before you begin, it's better to just hold off and start when the time is right. But if something crops up during your course that's unforeseen and is a good reason for stopping, then you can take what's called a voluntary interruption to study, or a VIS for short. And a VIS can be for any time period really, and it's something you negotiate with your tutor. You just provide a reason for stopping, and you suggest a length of time. Sometimes that could be a matter of a few weeks, it could be a few months, it could be a year. It's really up to you. During that period, you are essentially just frozen on the course. What you can't do is just continue to study in the background. So it's not a way of buying yourself extra study time. So during that period, you wouldn't have access to the materials, you wouldn't have access to your tutor. So it really is genuinely a break from study. But having said that, there is no penalty to you. It doesn't mean that you get a lower grade or any different qualification, so there's no disadvantage. So it's yes, the answer is yes, you can suspend your studies with no penalty and resume them later on. The maximum period of registration for the course is 3 years. So that's really, really strict. So you cannot study beyond 3 years. So if you sort of run out of time because of one of these pauses to your study, there isn't really anything we can do. So that's something to be very, very mindful of. Having said that, 3 years is quite a long period, isn't it? So if you've got a year's course and there is a 3-year period of maximum registration, that does allow, for instance, for somebody to stop for a whole year and to come back and still be okay. I suppose the only other thing I would say that you need to bear in mind is somehow fitting that around the workshops that you attend. So what would tend to happen is if you break your studies and you miss the second workshop, the second face-to-face opportunity, we try and fit you in perhaps with another cohort so that you could come along and join the next group, so that you might not be with the same group and the same tutor, but you've had that input, because again, it's really, really important to do that. So yes, you can pause your studies in those ways.
Excellent. And our last question is, if I start the program in October and attend the first workshop in the UAE, but I cannot attend the second workshop in the UAE, can I perhaps join another cohort anywhere in the world and do the second workshop?
We wouldn't normally do this. And I think I'd go back to something I said before about this would only ever be for a very unforeseen, unexpected situation. So you need to be very confident before you start that you can attend both of those things. If something unforeseen happened and was absolutely unavoidable and you provided us some evidence, then we will try and work with you in some way to get around not attending that second workshop. The ways that we do that would be really on a case-by-case basis. It might be that we say you could join, as I just said to the previous person, you could join a workshop with a subsequent group in the UAE. Possibly there's an opportunity to attend somewhere else in the world, I guess, but in practice that hasn't happened before. And the reason is that different groups around the world, although they follow the same course and the same modules, the way that the face-to-face workshops run is always different because it's tailored to the cohort somewhere else in the world. Some cohorts, for instance, if we thought of a cohort in China, for example, they have all of their face-to-face teaching in one big block. So they do one great big workshop for a week, and that's it. So it's difficult sometimes to marry up the approach. It's not just as simple as joining another group. So I think the answer I'd need to give, which is a bit vague, is to say, in an exceptional situation, we would just talk to you, negotiate with you, and find the best way tailored to you to get around that situation.
Excellent. And Natasha, we have already answered the question regarding to QTS. I am going to mention that this webinar has been recorded, so I am going to be sending the recording to everyone that has attended. So you'll be able to pick up the answer to that QTS question. Okay. All right, so basically I'm going to leave it at that because we have actually grouped most of the questions together. And once again, it was a great pleasure having you with us again, Dr. Rupert. Very informative session. Great questions, everyone. It was great having you with us this evening.